Ethan Cole didn't need the alarm clock anymore. His internal clock, sharpened by years in the military, woke him before dawn. The silence of the early morning gave him peace. No bullets, no shouting, no chaos, just the slow rhythm of his breathing, and the steady patting of paws across the wooden floor. Duke, his German shepherd, stirred beside him. The dog had been with him through 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. They had seen more than any man or animal should, but here, in this quiet Virginia suburb, things were supposed to be different, peaceful. Ethan clipped Duke's leash and stepped outside. The air was crisp, still soaked in the scent of dew. Birds chirped hesitantly, as if unsure whether the day had fully begun. The sun barely kissed the horizon, casting gold streaks through the trees. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to believe this was home. They walked the same route each morning, a 3-mile loop past neighborhood homes, a church, a corner store, and back. It gave Duke structure, gave Ethan purpose. But that morning, halfway through their walk, something changed. It started with a smell, subtle at first, then thicker, sharper, smoke. Duke froze. His ears perked up, nose twitching toward the southeast. Ethan followed his gaze. Above the trees, rising against the pale morning sky, was a thick column of black smoke. His instincts kicked in before his thoughts did. "Come on, boy," he muttered, already jogging. As they rounded the corner, the source came into view, a 2-story home. Flames licking through the upstairs windows, the fire spread fast, devouring siding and cracking glass with every surge. Neighbors shouted and pointed. One man was on the phone with emergency services, panic thick in his voice. "Is anyone inside?" Ethan asked. Already knowing the answer, a woman, pale and trembling, sobbed uncontrollably. "My girls, my twins, they're still in there, upstairs. I couldn't." Her voice broke as she collapsed to her knees. Ethan didn't waste a second. He handed his phone and keys to a teenager standing nearby. "Call if you haven't already. Make sure the street's clear. Keep people back." Duke barked once, sharply, understanding the tone if not the words. This wasn't a walk anymore. Ethan approached the house, flames now dancing along the porch railings. Smoke poured from every crack. The front door had already burned away. Without hesitation, he yanked off his hoodie and wrapped it over his mouth and nose. He glanced at Duke. "Stay low. Find the girls." They charged inside. The heat was immediate, like walking into a furnace. Every breath felt like inhaling acid. Smoke clouded his vision. Ethan dropped to his knees and crawled forward, hand on Duke's back, guiding them both through the burning wreckage. The living room was unrecognizable charred furniture, sparks flying from what had once been a TV, and walls shedding ash like dying trees. He pushed forward, heading toward the staircase. It creaked violently under his weight, but he had no choice. Halfway up, he heard a faint, high-pitched cry. Help! Ethan's heart raced. He turned the corner at the top of the stairs. The hallway was worse, flames on both sides, walls crumbling, but at the end, a door stood ajar. Duke bolted forward, nosing it open. Inside, crouched beneath a wooden bed, were the little girls, no older than 6, identical, trembling, soot-covered faces, wide teary eyes. "Hey," Ethan said gently, crouching down. "It's okay. I'm here to get you out." One girl reached for him, the other reached for Duke. "Is he a superhero?" she asked in a tiny voice. Ethan smiled grimly. "Yeah, the best one I know." He scooped up one twin in his arms, wrapping her in his hoodie to shield her from the heat. Duke crouched low beside the other, nudging her forward gently. She gripped his harness tightly. "Hold on to him," Ethan told her. "Don't let go. He'll get you out." But just as they turned, the hallway behind them groaned, then buckled. The floor gave way, sending smoke and flame roaring into the room. Their path was gone. Ethan cursed under his breath. He scanned the room, a window, their only chance. He kicked the frame. The glass cracked, once more shattered. The drop outside wasn't far, maybe 10 feet to the grass below, but it would be rough, risky, still safer than staying. "Duke, go," he commanded. Duke obeyed without hesitation, leaping through the window, the girl still clutching his harness. Ethan could hear shouts from below. Sirens now screamed in the distance. He turned back to the other twin. "Ready?" She nodded. Ethan wrapped her tighter, turned his back to the window, and jumped. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. He rolled, shielding her as best he could. Firefighters and paramedics rushed over, Hands pulled the child from his arms. Others surrounded Duke. The girl Duke had saved was already being checked, her tiny voice asking, "Is my dog okay?" Ethan sat up slowly. Every part of him ached, but the girls were alive. That was all that mattered. As he looked over and saw both twins safe, hugging Duke as if he were a stuffed animal come to life, Ethan finally allowed himself a breath. He had survived war, survived loss, and now, maybe, something else had begun. Chaos surrounded the smoldering home as firefighters arrived in full gear. Their boots stomped through ash and broken glass, hoses sneaking around the front yard, water arcing into the flames above. The roof began to groan under pressure, splintering, as fire consumed it inch by inch. But amidst the screaming, sirens, and smoke, the little girls clung to the unlikely heroes who had pulled them from certain death, one to a soot-covered soldier, the other to a war-scarred German shepherd who panted heavily but refused to lie down. Duke stood watchful, alert, despite the bleeding scrape on his hind leg. Ethan Cole knelt beside him, hand resting on Duke's shoulder. His own arms were shaking, not from the fall, not from pain, but from adrenaline. He looked down at the girls. They were coughing, red-faced, but alive. That was all that mattered. Get them oxygen. Ethan barked to a paramedic. One firefighter, shocked to recognize Ethan, muttered, "That guy's a damn lunatic." He ran straight in. "Lunatic or not," someone else replied, "he saved those girls." The girl's mother, still trembling from shock, sprinted forward and fell to her knees beside them. She reached out to grab both girls, hugging them so tight it looked like she might never let go again. Her voice cracked. "Lily, Grace, oh, my God, oh my babies." Ethan took a few steps back. His lungs were burning. He bent down, coughing into his elbow. He could still feel the heat behind his eyes, the thick smoke in his chest. A medic approached him, but he waved the offer off. "I'm fine. Check on Duke first," he rasped, pointing to his partner. Duke wasn't fine, not entirely. His leg was bleeding from the glass, and his breathing was strained, but he stayed upright. One of the twins, Grace, he thought, knelt beside him and held his face between her tiny soot-streaked hands. "Good dog," she whispered. "You're the bravest ever." Duke licked her face gently, tail swaying once, weakly. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the sting of tears, not from fear, not from war, but from something far rarer in his life, relief. Fire crews began to get the blaze under control. As the sun rose higher, neighbors stood quietly, many with phones in their hands, recording the aftermath. Word of the rescue began to spread first across the neighborhood, then across the county as local reporters arrived. A young journalist from Channel 9 approached Ethan hesitantly. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. That was brave." Ethan didn't respond. He watched Duke, who had now finally agreed to lie down as a medic gently cleaned the wound on his leg. Brave? No, that wasn't the word Ethan would have chosen. Desperate, maybe. Haunted, definitely. He hadn't gone into the fire to be a hero. He went because he couldn't face failing to save someone again. The memory of a little girl, his little girl, flashed in his mind. Blonde hair, blue eyes, smiling from the back seat of a car in Kabul before everything exploded in front of him. That had been the end of his world. The reason he shut everyone out. He clenched his fists and blinked back the image. Not now. Not in front of them. Lily and Grace were being loaded gently into the back of an ambulance. The mother turned to Ethan and grabbed his hand tightly. "Thank you," she choked out. "You saved their lives." Ethan nodded but didn't speak. What do you say to a mother who nearly lost everything? What do you say when you almost couldn't save them? Instead, he looked her in the eye and simply said, "They're strong. You've got to fighters." Then he turned to Duke, who was now drinking from a water bottle an EMT had emptied into a plastic bowl. Ethan crouched beside him. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. "Real good." Duke looked up at him with tired but alert eyes. That dog had saved Ethan more times than he could count, physically, mentally, emotionally, and once again, he'd gone straight into hell with him and come out alive. Later that day, Ethan sat on the back bumper of a fire truck, a blanket over his shoulders, watching the fire smolder into embers. A police officer offered him a bottle of water and said, "We've already got requests for interviews coming in. TV, newspapers, even national outlets." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not interested in fame." "You sure? People want to hear stories like this." Ethan stood slowly, adjusting the weight on his left leg. which had taken the brunt of the landing earlier. They don't need to hear it from me. Just tell them the girls are okay. That's all that matters. The officer gave a respectful nod. Understood. By mid-morning, the area was taped off, but the streets still buzzed. Neighbors who barely knew each other before now talked in circles, pointing to the house, replaying every second. They used words like miracle, hero, angel. Ethan didn't want any of them. He wanted silence. He wanted to forget the heat of the flames, the weight of that little girl's body in his arms, the split-second decisions that could have gone wrong in 1,000 ways. And yet, deep inside, something had changed. He couldn't name it yet, but it was there stirring. Later that evening, he received a phone call from the hospital. The girls were asking for him. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fresh linens. Sunlight streamed softly through the half-open blinds, casting long, golden stripes across the polished floor. Lily and Grace lay in adjacent beds, small oxygen tubes under their noses, IVs taped gently to their arms. They were bruised, red-eyed, and exhausted, but very much alive. Ethan stood just inside the doorway, uncertain whether to take another step. Duke walked in ahead of him, tail wagging slowly. The second the girls saw the dog, their faces lit up. Duke, Grace squealed, trying to sit upright. A nurse gently eased her back onto her pillow. Lily pointed. "He's wearing a bandage. Is he okay?" Ethan smiled faintly. "He's tougher than all of us. Just a scratch." Duke trotted forward and rested his head on Lily's mattress. She stroked his ears lovingly, her tiny fingers running over his coarse fur like it was the softest silk. The girl's mother, Amy, stood from a chair in the corner. She looked exhausted, pale, her eyes swollen from crying, but grateful beyond measure. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around Ethan without a word. He hesitated, then returned the hug stiffly. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already have," he replied. Quietly, Amy looked at him, her expression caught between wonder and disbelief. "I still can't believe what you did. I mean, who runs into a burning house without thinking twice?" Ethan didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the girls. Grace was now making a super dog cape from her hospital blanket and trying to drape it over Duke's back. He stood there patiently, tail wagging in approval. Ethan cleared his throat. "You mind if I sit with them for a bit, please?" Amy nodded. "They've been asking about you all morning." Ethan took a seat between the beds, Duke lying down beside him. Lily reached over and took his hand. "Were you scared?" she asked softly. He thought about that. "I was," he said truthfully, "but not for me. I was scared I wouldn't get to you in time." "You did," she said proudly. "You're like a fire soldier." Grace piped in. "And Duke's your sidekick." He smiled at that. "Actually, I think I'm his sidekick." The girls giggled, and Ethan felt something shift deep in his chest, a cracking open, a loosening. It wasn't laughter he heard. It was healing. A nurse entered with a tray of Jell-O cups and apple juice. The girls barely acknowledged her. Their eyes remained fixed on Ethan and Duke, as though their presence made them feel safest of all. Amy pulled a chair closer to the window and sat, watching silently. She seemed to sense that something was happening, something important, and didn't dare interrupt. The girls chatted about their favorite cartoons, what colors they wanted to paint their new bedroom once their home was rebuilt, and how they wanted Duke to have a superhero mask next time he visited. "I think he'd like that," Ethan said, "but only if you help design it." "We will." Both girls cried in unison. Lily then looked at Ethan seriously. "Are you really a soldier?" "I was." He nodded. "Not anymore." "Why not?" He hesitated. "Sometimes soldiers come home because they've seen too much, and they need to rest." Grace tilted her head. "But don't you miss it?" Ethan blinked. That question, so innocent, hit harder than any blast he'd ever survived. "I miss the people," he admitted, "but I don't miss the war." Lily looked at him for a moment, then reached for his hand again. "My daddy was a soldier, too," she whispered. Ethan's heart paused mid-beat. Amy looked up sharply. He glanced at her, but she gave a small shake of the head. Lily hadn't spoken about her father since the fire. "What happened to him?" Ethan asked gently. "He went to heaven when we were babies," she said. Silence settled like a blanket over the room. Ethan didn't know what to say. He looked into Lily's big blue eyes so eerily like his daughters once weren't, and felt something roster within him. Pain, regret, maybe even guilt. Lily leaned closer, eyes solemn. "But when you came in the fire, I thought maybe you were him." Ethan's breath caught. She reached up and touched his cheek. Then she said it. "Hi, Daddy." The words were a whisper, but they thundered in Ethan's soul. His vision blurred instantly. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His body sat rigid, frozen in place. His hands trembled. The room around him faded. All he could see was her, this little girl, calling him something he hadn't heard in years. Not since Afghanistan. The dusty road, the marketplace, the bomb. His daughter, Lily, just 7 years old, had died in his arms, and he hadn't saved her. He never forgave himself, never let himself grieve properly, never believed he deserved to. Until now. He lowered his head, his tears finally falling. Duke whimpered and nudged closer, resting his head in Ethan's lap. Amy, from across the room, wiped her own tears quietly. She didn't speak. She knew not to. Lily squeezed his hand again and said softly, "It's okay. You don't have to cry. You came back." Ethan nodded, barely able to respond. "Yeah," he whispered. "I did, and for the first time in years, he believed it." The hospital released Lily and Grace 3 days later, though they still bore the signs of smoke inhalation, occasional coughing fits, tired eyes. Bandages on their tiny hands. They were cleared to go home, or rather, to what was left of home. The fire had consumed most of the upstairs. Their bedroom, where Ethan and Duke had found them, was gone charred black. The walls caved in. Fire investigators confirmed what everyone suspected. A faulty outlet sparked a blaze that spread quickly. During the early morning hours, Amy stood outside the remains of their house, arm around both daughters, eyes hollow. "It's strange," she murmured to Ethan, seeing everything destroyed, but feeling so lucky. He stood beside her, arms folded, Duke sitting obediently by his leg. "Because you still have what matters." She looked down at the girls. Exactly. The community had rallied fast. A local church raised money. Volunteers helped sort through salvageable belongings. A neighbor offered her guest house for Amy and the girls to stay in temporarily. They accepted, grateful, but disoriented. Everything felt temporary now except, oddly, Ethan and Duke. They had become permanent fixtures in the girls' minds. Wherever Ethan went, the twins tried to follow. If Duke wasn't nearby, they'd ask about him every 10 minutes. They insisted he was their dog now. Ethan smiled every time, but deep inside, he didn't know what to make of it. One afternoon, just a week after the fire, Ethan dropped by the guest house with Duke. He hadn't planned to stay long, just enough to check in, maybe drop off a few toys and supplies for the girls. But as soon as they arrived, the girls ran to the door like he was the sun returning after a long night. "Ethan, Duke," they shouted in unison. Grace wrapped herself around Duke's neck while Lily pulled Ethan's hand inside. "You're staying for dinner, right? Mom made lasagna." He looked at Amy, who shrugged with a smile. "They already set you a plate." So he stayed. Dinner was warm, chaotic, full of second servings, crayon drawings, and laughter. Duke curled up near the fireplace while Grace tried to convince him to wear a plastic tiara. Lily showed Ethan her newest drawing, him holding their hands, with a giant fire behind them and hero written in bold letters overhead. He didn't correct her. He didn't want to. Later that evening, as Amy washed dishes in the kitchen and the girls played with Duke on the floor, Ethan sat quietly at the table, absorbing the unfamiliar comfort of it all. The warmth of a home, the smell of real food, the gentle buzz of a peaceful night. He hadn't realized how much he missed this until it found him again. Amy returned and sat beside him, glancing over at the girls. "They don't talk about the fire," she said quietly. "Not much, anyway. But they talk about you, constantly." Ethan shifted, unsure how to respond. She continued, "They've been through so much already. Their dad died when they were babies. I never expected them to latch on to anyone the way they have with you." He looked down. "I didn't mean to step in like that." "No," she said softly, "but I think they needed someone. And maybe you did too." Her words hung in the air, honest, heavy, but not pressuring. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "None of us do," she replied, "but somehow we figure it out." Ethan looked back at the girls. Duke was now lying on his side, completely surrendered to their dress-up attempts. He had a bow in his fur and a pink sock on one paw. Grace giggled uncontrollably while Lily kissed his nose and whispered, "You saved me." Those two words echoed in Ethan's mind. "You saved me." He had heard the phrase before, overseas, from civilians he pulled from collapsed buildings. From soldiers he dragged from firefights, but never like this. Never from someone so small and pure, with nothing to offer but love. That night, as Ethan prepared to leave, Lily ran to him with her arms stretched wide. He bent down and lifted her gently. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. He nodded. "If that's okay with your mom." Amy smiled. "It's more than okay." Grace hugged his leg. "We're building a pillow fort. Duke has to help." He laughed. "Then we better bring extra pillows." Outside, as the sky dimmed into twilight, Ethan looked up at the stars and took a deep breath. The memories of war were still there. The pain, the guilt, the ghosts. They probably always would be. But here, with these girls, this family, he never expected something was beginning to change. Duke nudged his hand gently. "Yeah, buddy," Ethan murmured, rubbing his fur. "Feels like we got out of the fire for a reason." As he climbed into his truck and started the engine, he saw the girls waving through the window. Smiles wide, hair tangled, eyes full of light. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like a broken man with a past. He felt like someone with a future. The next morning, Ethan awoke with an ache in his chest, not from smoke or injury, but from something he couldn't name. Maybe it was the way Lily had clung to him the night before, or the way Grace had laid her head on Duke's belly like. It was her pillow. It had stirred something in him, something long buried. He poured himself black coffee, watching Duke limp slightly across the living room, favoring his bandaged leg. The vet said it would heal fine, but Ethan could tell Duke was still stiff. Still, the dog's eyes were bright, alert. "You ready?" Ethan asked. Duke barked once, sharp and clear. They arrived at the guest house mid-morning. Amy greeted them with tired eyes and a smile. "They've been waiting by the window for the past 20 minutes, she said, brushing hair from her face. "You'd think the president was coming." "I'm no president," Ethan said. "To them, you're more," she replied. Inside, the girls had built an elaborate pillow fort in the middle of the living room. Blankets stretched across, dining chairs, flashlights and stuffed animals peeked out from the flaps. Lily crawled out and beamed. "We saved a spot for you and Duke." Ethan laughed, lowering himself onto the carpet. Duke settled in beside him, resting his head on his paws. Grace held up a paper crown. "You're the Fire King, and Duke's the dragon." Ethan grinned. "Sounds about right." As the girls crawled around the fort, creating storylines only they understood, Ethan sat back and watched, quietly overwhelmed by how natural it all felt. The chaos was simple, innocent, beautiful. Later, after lunch, the girls curled up beside Duke for a nap. Amy sat across from Ethan, folding tiny laundry. "I know this is all unexpected," she said, "but I'm glad you keep coming back." Ethan nodded slowly. "Me too." "You're good with them," she added. "Better than most." He hesitated. "I wasn't always." Amy looked up, sensing there was more. "I had a daughter," Ethan said quietly. "Her name was Lily, too." Amy's hand froze on a small t-shirt. "She died in Afghanistan," Ethan continued. "I wasn't there when the attack happened, but I was the one who took the call. Got on a flight the next morning. Buried her in Virginia 2 weeks later." Amy's voice was a whisper. "I'm so sorry." He nodded. "I haven't talked about her in years. Thought it would be easier to forget. But these girls, your girls," he trailed off, eyes distant. Amy placed a hand over his. "You don't have to explain. I see it." The room fell silent again, filled only with the sound of soft breathing from the makeshift fort. Duke's eyes blinked slowly, content to be surrounded by warmth. Suddenly, Lily stirred. She climbed out from the fort grovelly, rubbed her eyes, and walked over to Ethan. She climbed into his lap, laid her head against his chest, and yawned. He froze, barely breathing. "I had a dream," she mumbled. "Yeah." He asked softly. "You were there." "So was Duke. You saved me again." Ethan swallowed hard. "Sounds like a good dream." She nodded sleepily. "I think you used to be my daddy." His heart clenched. "Used to be?" "Yeah," she said, looking up at him. "But I think you're still him, just different." Then she whispered the same 2 words that had haunted him for days. "Hi, Daddy." This time, she said them not in fear, not in confusion. She said them with belief, with love. And just like that, Ethan felt the wall around his heart collapse completely. He couldn't stop the tears this time. They slid down his face silently, falling into Lily's tangled hair. Amy, standing nearby, covered her mouth and looked away. Lily wiped a tear from his cheek. "It's okay to cry. I cry sometimes too." "I know," Ethan whispered. Thank you for reminding me. He held her close, her heartbeat fluttering softly against his chest. In that moment, everything he'd run from caught up with him, but instead of breaking him further, it did. Something else. It began to put him back together. When Grace woke, she joined them without a word. Curling against his other side, Duke stretched his legs and sighed, a long, contented breath. Ethan sat there with both girls in his arms, unsure of what to call this feeling blooming in his chest. But whatever it was, it felt like home. Later that evening, as he stood to leave, both girls begged him to stay. Amy touched his arm. "You're welcome here anytime. You know that, right?" "I do now," he said. As he opened the front door, Lily ran after him and grabbed his hand. "Can I call you Daddy again tomorrow?" Ethan knelt down, heart tight in his chest. "You can call me whatever you want, sweetheart." She smiled. "Then I want to call you that forever." He kissed the top of her head, voice low and breaking. "I like that." Outside, the air was cooler now. Evening shadows crept across the yard. Ethan looked at Duke. "She called me Daddy," he whispered. Duke blinked slowly, then gave one soft bark. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, boy, I think maybe this is our second chance." Ethan didn't sleep that night. The words "hi, Daddy" echoed in his mind like a prayer and a ghost at the same time. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on knees, hands locked. Duke lay on the floor nearby, tail occasionally thumping against the rug, sensing his partner's restless energy. The house was quiet, too quiet for a man who once slept through rocket fire. The stillness now was louder than any battlefield. He opened the old wooden chest he hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside lay folded flags, commendations, and a tattered photograph of his wife holding their daughter, Lily, age 4, in front of their small house before his last deployment. She had the same wide eyes, the same stubborn chin as the little girl who now clung to him like a lifeline. His daughter had died in a marketplace bombing while visiting him overseas. His wife had never forgiven him or herself. They'd grown distant. And when she passed from cancer just 3 years later, Ethan had been left with nothing but a headstone and guilt that never aged until now. Until Lily and Grace, until that Lily called him Daddy. He shut the chest slowly and looked at Duke. "They're waking something up in me, boy. I don't know if I'm ready for it." Duke gave a quiet whine. "But maybe it's time." The next morning, Amy was surprised when Ethan showed up not in his worn hoodie and boots, but in pressed jeans and a clean collared shirt. His beard was trimmed. His eyes still carried a 1,000-yard stare, but there was a softness that she hadn't seen before. "You're early," she said, holding the door open. "I thought I'd bring breakfast," he replied, holding up a bag. "Pancakes from that place you mentioned. Blueberry for Grace. Chocolate chip for Lily." Amy's heart clenched. "You remembered." "I remember a lot of things now." The girls barreled toward him, hugging his knees, shouting, "Daddy, you came." Amy looked up, stunned, but Ethan just nodded gently and knelt to embrace them. "Course I came. I'm not going anywhere." That morning was different, calmer, joyful. They ate pancakes together at the table, syrup dripping and laughter echoing. Duke even got his share crumbled bacon and half a pancake snuck under the table by Grace. After breakfast, Ethan helped them build a backyard obstacle course using old tires and jump ropes. He even taught them how to give Duke silent command something he'd never shared with anyone outside the military. "You're part of our team now," Ethan told them. "You and me and Duke, Team Brave." They squealed with excitement, repeating the name over and over. "Team Brave, Team Brave." Amy watched from the window, her heart tugging. There was something healing in the way Ethan moved now, not just in how he guided the girls, but how they guided him. Later that afternoon, a knock came at the door. It was a local news crew. Ethan tensed instantly. Amy answered, her voice wary. The anchor explained they were doing a follow-up story on the fire, especially now that the girls were safe and the footage of Ethan carrying them out had gone viral. "People are calling him a hero," the woman said. "They want to know what drives a man to run into flames." Amy glanced at Ethan. His jaw was tight. "He doesn't really do interviews," she said. "We understand. But maybe just a short piece, off camera." Ethan stepped forward. "I'll talk," he said quietly. "But only if you talk to them too," he added, nodding at the girls. The journalist blinked. "Of course, we'd be honored." The interview was raw, honest. Ethan didn't talk about war. He talked about choices. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't going into danger, he said. It's coming back from it and deciding not to stay in the dark. He looked at Lily, who was drawing hearts on Duke's vest with sidewalk chalk. She called me daddy, and I think she saved me just as much as I saved her. When the segment aired later that night, viewers across the state were moved to tears. Donations flooded in for the girls. The local fire department offered Ethan an honorary medal, and strangers sent messages thanking him not just for saving lives, but for living again. That night, after the girls were tucked in, Amy sat beside Ethan on the porch. I haven't seen them this happy in months, she said. You've given them something I couldn't. Ethan shook his head. They gave me something. They gave me purpose. Amy turned to him. Have you thought about what comes next? I have, he said. I've been living out of memory for too long. I want to live forward now. With us? She asked gently. He nodded. If you'll have me. She reached over, took his hand. We already do. As fireflies lit the dusk and Duke lay at their feet, the world around them finally felt still in this time. It wasn't haunting. It was healing. The following days felt like chapters from a book Ethan never thought he'd live to read. The pain hadn't vanished, it lingered quietly, but now it lived alongside something else. Something gentler. Hope. Every morning began the same. The smell of toast and strawberry jam, to squealing girls launching into his arms, and Duke rolling on his back for belly rubs like clockwork. The soldier in Ethan still woke before sunrise, but now, instead of combat drills or cold tents, it was cartoons, cereal bowls, and the chorus of Can We Go Outside Now? Ethan had found something he never expected again, routine with a heartbeat. One Wednesday morning, Amy entered the room holding a small folder. I've been meaning to talk to you, she said softly, her eyes flicking toward the twins, playing in the yard. Ethan looked up from the coffee mug in his hand. What is it? These are temporary guardianship papers, she said, placing the folder on the kitchen counter. Just in case anything ever happened to me. Ethan blinked. Amy, I'm not sick, she added quickly, but after the fire, I realized how fragile life is. If something ever happens, I want someone I trust, someone who loves them, to be there. Ethan's throat tightened. He looked down at the folder, but couldn't bring himself to open it. Instead, he reached for her hand. You're not going anywhere, he said firmly, but if you do, I promise, I won't let them feel alone. Not ever. They stood there in silence for a moment, her hand in his eyes full of something deeper than words. Later that day, while Lily and Grace played tag with Duke in the backyard, Ethan sat with Amy on the steps. I had no idea kids could heal a man like this, he confessed. It's like every part of me that died came alive again the day she called me daddy. Amy smiled. You don't just love them, Ethan. You see them, and they see you too. He watched Lily whisper something into Duke's ear and giggle when the dog barked in response. I don't want to leave, he said. You don't have to. News of the rescue hadn't slowed down. A children's hospital invited Ethan and Duke to visit kids undergoing burn recovery. The city mayor announced a public appreciation day for the twins' bravery and Ethan's heroism. But none of it compared to the moment that came just a week later. Ethan, Amy, and the girls were invited back to the rebuilt remains of their former house. The fire chief had organized something special. When they arrived, the girls wore matching firefighter hats. Duke had a vest with a red Rescue K9 patch sewn into the side. Cameras clicked. Applause rang out, but Ethan held back, overwhelmed. The fire chief stepped forward. You didn't just save 2 children that day, Mr. Cole. You reminded this town what bravery looks like. Then he handed something to Lily and Grace. Small gold badges engraved with their names. And these 2 ladies, well, they're honorary firefighters now. The crowd erupted. Lily grinned. Grace saluted. Duke barked and spun in a happy circle. Amy wiped away a tear. Ethan, standing beside her, put an arm around her waist. For once, he didn't feel like a man haunted by loss. He felt like a man, filled with purpose. That night, Ethan tucked the girls into bed. Lily sat up suddenly and asked, Can you tell us a story about Duke, a real one? He smiled. You sure you're ready? Some are pretty wild. Tell us the one when he saved you, Grace whispered, eyes wide. Ethan hesitated. That story was sacred, but maybe, just maybe, they were old enough to hear it. There was a day, a long time ago, he began, in a place very far from here. Duke and I were on patrol, walking through a village. I didn't see the wire, but Duke did. He barked and jumped on me, knocked me down just in time. What happened next? Lily asked, gripping his arm. The bomb went off, but Duke saved my life. Silence fell. Then Grace reached out and gently pet Duke, who lay curled on the rug. He's our hero, she whispered. No, Ethan said, tucking the blankets tighter. You two are my heroes. Downstairs, Amy waited on the couch with 2 mugs of tea. You told them, she said softly as he joined her. He nodded. They asked, and how did it feel? Hard, he admitted, but it didn't hurt like before. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the creaks of the house, the wind brushing against the windows, and Duke's soft breathing nearby. You know, Amy said after a while, I keep thinking, maybe all this didn't happen to us. Maybe it happened for us. Ethan leaned back, eyes closed, warmth in his chest. Maybe it did, he whispered, and in that moment, wrapped in the quiet magic of second chances, the soldier, the mother, the dog, and the girls all found themselves exactly where they were meant to be, home. 6 months had passed since the fire. Summer had given way to crisp autumn mornings, and the trees now stood tall in their coats of amber and gold. The world felt different, lighter. Ethan Cole walked down the tree-lined street with Duke trotting beside him, leash held loosely in one hand, a small pink backpack slung over his other shoulder. Lily and Grace skipped ahead in matching coats, holding hands. School had started 3 weeks ago, and every morning Ethan walked them to the gates, where the twins insisted on hugging him and Duke in front of all their classmates. No matter how many kids giggled, Ethan never minded. He'd gone from watching his life burn down, metaphorically and literally, to being someone the little girls ran to every morning and whispered, "Don't forget to pick us up." He hadn't missed a single day inside the school. He helped hang up their bags and kissed both girls on the forehead. Be brave, he reminded them. We are, Grace said. Always, Lily added. They waved to him from the classroom. Door as he and Duke turned to leave. Halfway down the hallway, a boy walked up shyly. You're the soldier with the dog, the boy said. Ethan nodded with a warm smile. That's me. My mom said you saved those girls. Ethan glanced down at Duke. We did, but they saved us too. The boy looked confused but smiled anyway, then darted off. That sentence stuck with Ethan all morning. They saved us too. He realized then how true it was. That afternoon, Amy was already home when Ethan and the girls returned from school. She stood in the kitchen wearing a paint-splattered sweatshirt, mixing something that smelled like cinnamon and apples. I thought we could have a little celebration, she said. Did we forget something? Ethan asked, setting the girls' backpacks down. Well, she said, handing him a piece of paper. You forgot this. He unfolded it, a printed certificate with a gold seal. Official adoption clearance, Ethan James Cole, legal guardian to Lily and Grace Thompson. He stared at the paper. Amy smiled through tears. We've had it approved for a week. But I wanted to tell you, when we were all together, the twins had already guessed something was up. They ran over and hugged Ethan, nearly knocking the paper from his hands. Does this mean you're really our daddy now? Lily asked. Ethan dropped to one knee, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. I always was, he said quietly, but now it's on paper. Amy wiped her eyes and laughed. You're officially stuck with us, soldier. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. The house was louder now, fuller. Duke had his own spot near the fireplace, and the girls insisted he needed pajamas like theirs, which ended up being a large flannel shirt with the sleeves cut off. Ethan still woke early, still trained every morning, but his days weren't filled with silence or shadows anymore. One night, after the girls were asleep and Duke lay snoring softly at their feet, Ethan turned to Amy. I think I want to work with other veterans, guys like me, guys who never thought they'd find peace. Amy nodded. You should. You've lived it. You're proof it's possible. He squeezed her hand. With Duke's help, maybe we can do something real. They called it Operation Second Light, nonprofit pairing rescue dogs with combat veterans. Duke became the face of the program, and Ethan its heart. It spread fast, funded by community support and the very people who once watched him walk into a burning home. Without hesitation, months passed. Winter came, and one night, just before Christmas, a special event was held at the city auditorium. The mayor took the stage. There are many ways to define heroism. Sometimes it's found on a battlefield, sometimes in a burning home. But tonight, we honor a man who discovered it in fatherhood, in healing, and in love. Ethan was called forward, standing beside Duke as applause thundered through the crowd. He was handed a plaque to Ethan Cole and K9 Duke for showing U.S. that real courage is choosing to live again. Lily and Grace ran up from the front row. They didn't care about the cameras or crowd. They just wanted to be near him. Grace whispered, "We love you, Daddy." Lily followed with, "Forever." The words hit him like they always did, straight to the heart. But this time, they didn't break him. They built him. That night, back home, snow fell gently outside the window. Ethan stood by the fire, watching the girls wrap Duke in another set of pajamas, giggling as the dog groaned in exaggerated protest. Amy walked over, placing her arm around him. "You all right?" she asked. He nodded. "I am, for the first time in a long time. I really am." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're not just a hero, Ethan. You're their home." He looked at the family around him. "No," he said quietly, "they're mine." And in that cozy living room, with snow falling outside and love glowing from every corner, Ethan realized this was the kind of ending not even war or fire could take away. He hadn't just survived. He'd been reborn.